Schmidt from Early Light Academy. They will be the first school, we don't know when yet, that will take our show on the road and have a board meeting at Early Light. They've agreed to us doing that. And so Chair Bowles, thanks for letting us just get through some logistics and tell that really impactful story, we thought, as we just wanted to borrow a flag. And
This is one of those things.
no worries.
Wonderful.
I had to turn off my actual. All right.
Ready, Amber?
Good, Amber.
Okay. Thank you for those introductions, and welcome to everyone. Our first time meeting in this building in our new home of the Utah State Charter School Board. So welcome all who have come to be with us on this first day. And in the history of charters in Utah, this becomes a historical day, one of note, as we have moved into our own location and starting meetings here. It is now 9:36 on October 10th. We are the Utah State Charter School Board. As we open this meeting, we excuse today Member Olson, who is in trial today, and they didn't reschedule him. I mean, he should have been able to say, hey, I'm on the Utah State Charter School Board. They changed all the court system to make that happen, but he is still in trial. And Member Spiker, we also excuse today as she is a professor at Weber State University and is presenting, I think, today, and it so could not be here. We excuse both of them, but we also welcome Member Carey, who was the one that was the first one, I think, here today.
Yeah.
And representing the Utah State Board of Education, and he's always with us and continues to support. We really appreciate his consistency, and I think that's all to say. Just welcome to everyone else who is here, and we're ready to begin. So we do want to welcome, we do have someone else new. There was something nagging at me. You know how that is, but your brain, there's something else. We want to welcome Andrea to our team. This is her first meeting with us, just having started. Andrea Jones, and Mr. Kramer will introduce her a little bit later. So we'll hold on that. So the preview of coming attractions.
Yeah.
That's going to have some introduction later. But with the introduction to the flag that we are using today, we'll ask if Member Cisneros will lead us in the pledge.
Join me in the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. And because I can see the sign-in form from here, I'm thinking there are no public comments today, that there's anyone who's signed up to do that. And so we'll go right to our board member thought, which is Vice Chair Phillips.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, thanks.
So I usually have something that's prepared in writing, but this subject is actually near and dear to my heart. I love history so much, and especially the history of the United States, but also ancient history. And I just wanted to kind of speak from my heart on some very specific things that I've been thinking about. And it's a good thing that Member Spiker isn't here, because I've already tortured her with these thoughts in a previous phone call when we were talking about just something else unrelated to the State Charter School Board. And in fact, one of the reasons I learned the languages I learned was so that I could learn history more precisely. So even though I love the languages, the entry for me was the history. So in a statement reputed to Mark Twain, one that I love, he said, apparently, history doesn't repeat itself, but often rhymes. And I think that's actually, whether he said it or not, it's 100% a helpful lens to look at some of the things to inform us about maybe pitfalls we should avoid, things we should celebrate, and just yellow flags, red flags, even for some of our own times. So my thoughts today, unfortunately, are a little bit of a cautionary tale taken from the Roman Empire. And I just want to remind you all that the Roman Republic lasted before it fell and transitioned into another type of government for 500 years, more than twice as long as our republic has lasted. We often have the kind of inaccurate complacency and reassurance that we will last forever. And yet here was a republic that was amazing in its own way, flaws, of course, but was able to last twice as long, over twice as long as our own, and yet fell with a resounding crash. So the first thing I want to talk about is the aftermath of the Second Punic War, which was a time when Hannibal, you'll recall, the one who came across the Alps with the elephants, absolutely deracinated the Italian landscape. And it takes a long time to grow an olive tree. Grapevines to some degree as well, and other kinds of agricultural plants that lead to products. And so what happened in the aftermath of that war, only researched well when we finally had helicopters that could still rise up above the land and still see the scars upon the land and understand how devastating that scorch and burn policy had been. You had the very foundation of the Roman Empire, which was the citizen, soldier, farmer, completely destroyed. When you come back to your farm, and it was just a fairly modest piece of land anyway, and you farmed during certain seasons and fought during other seasons as a patriot for your country. And you realize that you don't have the money to actually wait till that farm rejuvenates itself. You sell, you have to live. You sell to someone who can purchase. And so what you had is a landless group of people who largely couldn't find work because the Romans, of course, in their conquest were also gaining slaves that would do that work for free, so to speak. There's a cost to it, but nevertheless for free. And you had a group of people, one-time patriots, one time fully invested in their country, living the Roman dream, if you will. And now a landless mass of people open to tyranny. Tyranny, of course, being someone who comes and promises security, if you will, either give up your freedom or cross constitutional boundaries. So what happened in this particular kind of context was that very wealthy individuals grabbed up the land and had huge, unbelievable estates called latifundia. And these essentially were what became the agricultural engine of the Roman Empire, with these other people disinvested on the side. When you have disinvested people in your society, you are ripe for revolution. This happened, of course, Julius Caesar wasn't born until 100 BC. This happened 100 years and was happening in the full century before he was born. And in that century, you had generals from Marius to Cinna to Sulla and ultimately to triumvirates and then Caesar, and at least the triumvirates were based on law, who began to pay soldiers to be full-time mercenary soldiers more loyal to their generals than to their state, than to their country, more loyal to an individual than to their country. They were promised land. They were promised investment, and they didn't have it, and they hadn't for generations, at least a few. And so Julius Caesar was the last in a long line of generals who took advantage of this situation of the disinvestment of the Roman citizen. And one of the reasons he was killed, Pace, Shakespeare, that was a great play, I love it. But the reason he was really killed is because he was a popularis, and he wanted to break up the latifundia and give land back to the Roman people and invest them. But the people who didn't want that were the wealthy senators of Rome who stabbed him. It was more complicated than that, but not that much more complicated than that. And what happened from that point was essentially civil war, of course, that had been going on already for a long time. But in the midst of that, before Caesar was born, another thing happened besides the disinvestment to cause the destruction of the Republic. And there were economic factors and other factors, military factors and so on. But these are some of the core reasons. A pact had been made between the patricians and the plebeians in the early Republic, whereby a very important official of the people called the Tribune of the People, a lot like our Bill of Rights, had the power of veto over any law or action from any committee, the Senate, a consul, any official that would have undue harm on the Roman people. And because they knew that individual holding power, and there was more than one, but that office would incur upon itself a lot of hatred and resentment, they made a pact, the people, that the person of the Tribune of the People was sacrosanct. And should anyone touch and harm the Tribune of the People, that broke the original pact. One might call it the constitutional agreement. Because remember, constitutions are largely in this world not written. They are adhered to by tradition. Even the British Constitution is like that. Laws make it up, documents make it up, but it is not a single document. It is what is constituted, if you will. And what happened in that melee after Hannibal and the disinvestment and disenfranchisement of the people, and in the strong tyrants, if you will, dictators, generals, who took advantage of that situation for their own power, understandably, soldiers followed them, disinvested, disenfranchised soldiers. What happened was, in the midst of tribunes, for the first time in the Republic, after the Republic had made this pact a good 350 to 400 years before, tribunes of the people were hunted down and killed by mobs, led by senators. So the second thing besides that disenfranchisement of the people is the breaking of constitutional boundaries, the overstepping and disregarding of the things that hold society together, that allow us to say, we are a people who work together because we all adhere to these kinds of processes, these kinds of rules, right? And then finally, one of the strongest and most brilliant men of all in terms of propaganda and gathering around himself, very talented people, would be Augustus, the grandnephew of Julius Caesar, who was adopted as his son and eventually became the first emperor of Rome. And what he did, which we really need to think about strongly, I think, in our contemporary environment, is he told, after taking over power, the biggest lie of all, which was, res publica restituta. I have restored the Republic. Now, what he in fact had done is made himself princeps, first among equals. That should give you a little Orwellian illusion moment from Animal Farm, if any of you have read that, but and perhaps even 1984 if you think about it. But regardless, he told the big lie. He said, I have restored the Republic. Now, it wasn't entirely a lie. That's the interesting thing about it. After over 100 years of civil war, he brought peace. After 100 years of civil war, he settled people on land and enfranchised them. But the price of that, and he gave them jobs, rebuilding of the beautiful city of Rome that became the envy of the world. It was absolutely beautiful. He said, he bragged that he founded a city of bricks and left it a city of marble. But the cost of that security was freedom. The cost of that was the Republic. And for Augustus and for all those who had lived through all that war and then through his restoration of the Republic, by the time he died, because he lived to be a very old man for those times, no one alive could actually remember what the Republic had been. So that was the Republic. We have to think about how very easy it is for the things that we love and cherish and care about and think are our ideals, how quickly they can disintegrate, how hard they are to build, and how easily destroyed they are in a generation, really. The great historian Tacitus, by the way, I'll first read Augustus and then I'll end, but Augustus had erected around all over the empire, and particularly outside of his mausoleum, his res gestae, the things I've accomplished. In my 6th and 7th consulships, when I had extinguished the flames of civil war after receiving by universal consent the absolute control of affairs, that's not actually a lie in the sense of he was granted, voted by the people, a desperate, worn out, disenfranchised people, the power of the tribune for life. Sacrosanct now as a person, held up by the people, but absolutely a tyrant. I transferred the republic from my own control to the will of the Senate and the Roman people. Truly a lie. For this service on my part, I was given the title of Augustus, which really means, besides having religious connotations, means something like, may you ever increase. By decree of the Senate, and the doorposts of my house were covered with laurels by public act, and a civic crown was fixed above my door, and a golden shield was placed in the Curia Julia, whose inscription testified that the Senate and the Roman people gave me this in recognition of my valor, my clemency, my justice, and my piety. That Roman word pietas, meaning I put my country, my gods, and my family above myself. A lie. After that time, I took precedence of all in rank, but of power I possessed no more than those who were my colleagues in any magistracy. Compare this to Tacitus' evaluation of this. He seduced the army with bonuses, and his cheap food policy was successful bait for civilians. Indeed, he attracted everybody's goodwill by the enjoyable gift of peace. Then he gradually pushed ahead and absorbed the functions of the Senate, the officials, and even the law. Opposition did not exist. War or judicial murder had disposed of all men of spirit. Upper-class survivors found that slavish obedience was the way to succeed, both politically and financially. They had profited from the revolution, and so now they liked the security of the existing arrangements better than the dangerous uncertainties of the old regime. Besides, the new order was popular in the provinces. There, the government, by Senate and people, was looked upon skeptically as a matter of sparring dignitaries and extortionate officials. Remember, republics are not perfect, right? They're messy. This is cleaner. It felt better to the provinces. The legal system had provided no remedy against these, since it was wholly incapacitated by violence, favoritism, and most of all, bribery. So history does not repeat itself. We are not the Roman Republic, but a great and glorious republic that had lasted for over 500 years fell. And we will too, if we don't intentionally work to enfranchise our fellow citizens, to ensure that we maintain constitutional, agreed upon civic processes, and if we are seduced by big lies. Thank you, Chair Bowles.
Thank you. Would you have expected anything different from Cindy?
No.
Her thought today. I love these thoughts because we not only learn about each other, but from our own unique perspectives and the things that come together. And that's exactly what, you know, Cindy's thoughts are layered. And so I know I'll be thinking about each of those layers over time. But today, my first view is just that notion of ethics and leadership and honesty and truth and leading people that, you know, stepping out of place to lead for the greatest good. And so there's a lot more there that I'll be thinking about. Even a verb I had no idea. I thought I knew a lot of words, but Hannibal came over the mountain, you said, and he
Deracinated. And it means to pull up by the roots. It's a wonderful word. And
It
of course,
is a
it comes
wonderful
from,
word.
comes from Latin, so.
All right, so I need to see that. I added a new word. Every day we should learn something new,
Mhm.
right?
There it is.
Deracinated today, plus some really tremendous thinking that I would expect from Cindy, who is such a scholar, to help to guide us. Thank you,
Thanks,
Cindy,
Brian.
for
Thank
that
you.
thought. Thank you so much. I should have mentioned also earlier that we had a signing, as you see on the west wall, the charter agreement signing day with Vanguard Academy and Canyon Grove, which are going to be kind of, I think, our new mode, that as we have agreements that we sign together, that is just symbolically talking about the partnerships that we are establishing with schools and that we're here to partner in. As they succeed, everyone succeeds, as each one individually carried on through the notion about the flag that we're all here together and Cindy's beautiful thoughts. So thank you so much. All right, with that, we are ready to move to the consent calendar. For board members, is there anything on that consent calendar you would like to pull? Not seeing any. Not seeing any. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to accept the consent calendar as outlined.
All right, motion from member Bassett to accept the consent calendar. A second to that motion,
I'll second.
and a second from member Cisneros. Any discussion about any items there? All right, all those in favor of the motion to accept the consent calendar, say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? All right, passes unanimously. We are ready to move to our executive director's report, and Director Kramer, that's yours.
Thank you so much, Chair Bowles. Thank you for the message today, Vice Chair. Appreciate it. Just a couple of board and staff updates, and the first being just a board replacement review. This is review. We've talked about it in the past, but October, November, we expect the governor to appoint a new member to our board. In November and December, we expect the Senate to confirm the appointment of the governor. And that leads to us to continue to have the service of Vice Chair Phillips through November and December as we've been planning. We appreciate your service very much. It also could provide some overlap and some training opportunities and onboarding for our new board member to come potentially January 1st. So I just wanted to review that for all of us in case you're like, when are we getting our newest member? We've talked about it. Important just to review. Board Executive Committee preview, it's on the agenda today. And so we do have our vice chair per our bylaws that has led us through a process that ultimately will lead to board consideration and a board motion. We do have just one committee update. The only committee, well, actually our executive committee always meets with Marie and myself as executive leadership. We receive continued support and leadership and food from our executive committee, and we appreciate that so much. It's cherished and it's necessary so that we follow our strategic plan and that we carry out the will of this board. We did have our finance committee meet with member Biesinger on Tuesday, October 1st, along with Lisa from our team. And we just received some additional input regarding our financial framework. Member Biesinger had some input that he shared in our public meeting. And then as a committee, we were able to enjoy some further thoughts and we incorporated a lot of the committee's recommendations. Coming soon, we expect more executed agreements because people are going to want to do this signing day thing. So we do expect more. We also are yet to start our innovation reports, kind of been started by our team, but we'll need our innovation committee support for that. One of the biggest things for today that we wanted to do with the executive director's report, if you go to the next slide, please, is just an introduction to Andrea Jones, our new executive assistant. We had 211 applications for this position. Of that, we put it through a review an internal review of all of the different resumes and application materials and narrowed it down to 62 candidates. From there, we went and we had 34 candidates after further review and questioning of that. We went through a process of phone interviews, of texting and other communications with between 16 and 21. We kept whittling down the 211 people that applied for this position. Ultimately, we had 4 individuals that virtually interviewed for this position. And 2 came in, or 2 wanted to come in for an in-person interview where we had tasks lined up and we had a formal interview. We are so happy to have Andrea Jones go through this rigorous process and to join us on our team. We hired her because she's kind. We hired her because she takes feedback extremely well. She's from the private sector, so she's very responsive and customer service oriented. And she had a lot of tasks that she managed in her previous positions. And we know we have a lot of high-level tasks, low-level tasks, and everything in between. And so I want to turn it over to Andrea Jones to introduce herself to our board, as our team has really welcomed you onto our team, but I want our board to get to know you. So Andrea, I'm going to turn it over to you. Andrea, sorry. I know that.
Hello, everyone. I'm just reading off real fast. I would like to thank you all for giving me a minute to introduce myself. My name is Andrea Jones. I am a native Texan, so I'm not from Utah, but have lived in Europe and Utah previously. I come from a Mexican-American family, so I indeed do speak Spanish. Anybody can speak too. I married my high school sweetheart and we have 4 wonderful kids. I am passionate about everything I do, but being a mom takes the cake and priority. I have great passion for helping others and am familiar with what charter schools do, as I did graduate from a charter school back in Texas. That specifically helped me, it specifically helped me graduate while also navigating being a teen mother. I have great compassion to what a lot of charter schools stand for. I have several family members who are on the spectrum and live with disabilities that have benefited from charter schools and could benefit from charter schools that could have a vision and mission to support students with disabilities. I am new to the public sector, like Dr. Kramer said. I have worked in the private sector as an executive assistant prior to moving to Utah. I'm excited to be a part of this amazing organization. I look forward to working closely with Dr. Kramer and Marie Stephenson as their executive assistant, and as well as assisting in executing the board's strategic plan and everything else that comes along the way.
The board, you can see why she made it from 211 to being here with us today. Chair Bold, if there's any other part of introductions to Andrea Jones, let me know. Otherwise, I'm prepared to continue to move forward.
I'll look to the board if there's any, other than bienvenidos to the charter school board. Happy to have you here. Okay.
Right, then an update regarding PACE Strategies. PACE Strategies is a communication partner. That's what they are. They don't set what we communicate. Our board and our strategic plan sets what in fact we communicate, but they help frame it. They help ask important questions, and they're a true communications partner. One of the things that they're helping us communicate is a celebration of 25 years in 2025 of Utah Charter Public Schools. They've been instrumental in just help organizing this great event. We'll have an agenda item on it later today. But I just wanted to say that PACE Strategies is in the right position to help us communicate and to help us talk to parents and other stakeholders. They've been a good partner for us. We do have an update regarding the IT needs analysis. I announced at a previous executive director's report that we needed to go through an IT needs analysis. We in fact hired a third party to help analyze how we move or don't move from the Utah State Board of Education services. It took a while to finalize that third party just last week and to sign the agreement. So we have had one meeting with them, but I know, Amber, that hour and a half, 2 hours was super helpful. They asked the right questions. They know how to articulate IT. Those things are important for us as we don't have the full capacity on that. And P&I, who's our partner in this work, does. We'd also have an update regarding our financial needs analysis. Like our IT needs analysis, we need someone, a partner, to ask the right questions and to also articulate, what we may or may not need financially from the Utah State Board of Education. We have a partner in Academica West who actually donated their services to the State Charter School Board. And they've already prepared some initial recommendations and some initial observations after a few staff meetings. There'll be more to come. An update regarding the MOU work. I think the emphasis here is it actually is MOU work, which we've identified in our last board meeting, and not board rule. And it continues to be a focus on MOU. It may take a few weeks to update the draft of where it's at right now. We have to incorporate some of the results of the needs analysis, both of them, maybe at a high level, maybe medium, maybe there's additional details that we might need to incorporate, then to schedule everyone's time and to follow through is on that. We appreciate Vice Chair Phillips' leadership as our board has directed her to lead our efforts in the MOU work. Any corrections and improvements? As a team, we tried to get some materials out to this board before the meeting. We only accomplished it by 1 day. Maybe next time it's 2 days and then half a week and a week, but we did get it out 1 day before, and we have it on our mind to continue to circulate any board materials that are important for this board to kind of consider before a board meeting. It's on our minds. And so that is an area for improvement that we'll continue to work on. There's just a few celebrations. I'm going to turn it over to Associate Executive Director Stephenson, and that will then conclude our Executive Director's report.
So it was a busy month with moving, but we were able to get a school visit in. We got to go visit Freedom Preparatory Academy, and we actually kind of did a double duty here. We were able to do a executive director visit, but also help out with their comprehensive review as the team was all double booked and across the state that day. And so Dr. Kramer and I really enjoyed getting to visit and have our typical conversation, but also getting to lead the 5-year comprehensive review as well in that conversation, and getting to meet with their administrative team as well as their board leadership there at the school, and just hear all about the great things that are happening at the school, as well as some of their goals and things that they'll be working on over the next 5 years.
One of the things I really appreciated as we walked and talked with leadership there is that they are one of our largest CMOs in Utah for charters, but yet the leadership knew students by name, and leadership was very quick to praise the staff as we walked the halls. That's outstanding to both be an organizing management for several schools, but yet know the people that you work with. That was a fun one.
It really was. A couple of things to highlight here. They have 5 different academies essentially that the students can enter in high school. That was fun to learn about. Their population has really pivoted over their existence. They're one of our older, more distinguished, I guess, charter schools. And so it's been fun to watch them respond to their community needs. And then we also got to see their robotics program, which is primarily led by females, which was really exciting to hear about as well. We're not able to visit yet. Let's see, is it moving forward? I advanced. You advanced?
I think it's the cards.
Yes, they are behind us. American Principals Academy sent out cards and a book. So if you haven't had a chance to look at those yet, they sent out a bunch of thank you notes, thanking the board for their school, their authorization. They just opened this fall and are so excited and so happy to be in operation. Each grade level either created a card or a book And so just wanted to highlight that and our appreciation back to them for their notes of gratitude. And then a few other celebrations that we wanted to highlight. Looks like we might have a little lag.
I think so.
Just keep going, is that the National Alliance for Public Charter Schools put out a report just on October 8th, so a couple days ago. They were looking at 5-year trends for charter enrollment versus district or non-public charter school or non-public charter enrollment across the nation. And so specifically looking at Utah, the 5-year trend was that charters saw a growth of 2.14, while district school growth over those 5 years was 0.7. So something to celebrate that we have more students entering into the charter system in the state of Utah. Also, the U.S. News and World Report came out after the school report cards also came out recently. And we were happy to celebrate that we had 5 charters on the best high schools list. Sorry, the screen will catch up in a minute. But those 5, we had Beehive as the #1 high school in Utah, Carl G. Mazur as the #3, Itinerus as #4, New Ames as #7, and Ames as #8. So exciting to celebrate our great charters and the high schools that are doing that great work.
It's amazing.
And then the final one we wanted to highlight, also coming from the USBE's Data Gateway and the school report cards, was that for the ACTs, the 2024 scores in Utah, charter schools took 9 of the top 10 spots. And we actually were the top 9 out of those top 10. So it looks like it disconnected me, but I will reconnect. #1 was UCAS, 2 was Success Academy, 3 was Intech Collegiate Academy, 4 was Carl G. Mazur, 5 was Ames, 6 was New Ames, 7 is Beehive, 8 is Leadership Academy of Utah, and 9 is Salt Lake School for the Performing Arts. So congratulations to all of those charter schools.
And that would be the conclusion of the executive director's report. Thank you, Chair
Thank you
Bowles.
so much, Director Kramer and Stephenson. We appreciate that report. And our schools are doing well. We talked about last time measures. We continue to help them to say what else can we do to help schools to improve and to support them all because we want children to have great opportunities. And some are just knocking it out of the park, obviously doing such a great job in those. And we shouldn't pass by Member Cisneros School as among those schools. So congratulations to her for that great success at Itinerus. All right, thank you for that great report. Good things happening. We share the really good things and nice, it's really good. Sometimes we share things that we're struggling with as well. This is a nice report today that some of the good things. We're going to talk now about an opportunity with Cambridge Prep Academy. And I'm going to invite Cambridge Prep folks, if you would like to come use these chairs at the end of the table so we can be in a round table together and talk together. Let me give you a little introduction and then we'll go from there. So Cambridge Prep is an authorized school. It's pre-operational. They have authorized with Utah State University, and they are seeking to potentially transfer that charter, their authorized charter, to the State Charter School Board. We haven't done that lately, but it has happened several times. We talked, New Ames was on that list, which is a school I worked with in starting and chartered when I was a superintendent, but it was transferred to the state. Actually, all the schools that we initially chartered, we asked to be transferred to the State Charter School Board just for logistically, it worked really well. This is also a logistic kind of request. And so the Cambridge Prep Academy is asking us to consider potentially that authorized charter to be moved to this board instead. It's been authorized. It's not a financial change in state finances. It would just be a change of authorizer. It's something we can consider. And I suspect, is there anything else, Maria, Paul, that you need to say, or should we just?
I think for
Go
this
right to
agenda
the
item, I have about a 5-minute opening. And then we'll turn it to Cambridge
Thank
Academy
you.
and then
Thank
about
you
a
for joining us.
5-minute
Good work.
closing.
Yeah, thanks.
So
All
it'll
right,
kind of bookend it a little bit.
great.
Thank you, Chair Bowles. I'm gonna go without the slides right now because it's information for our board. The slides really organize what we're talking about anyway. There's not any fancy pictures on the slide, so I know we're kind of troubleshooting that. Just to reiterate, this is a transfer of authorizer for a pre-operational school. Right now, there's no students, there's no staff, but there is a board and there is other people that are involved. But I think that you can't underscore that enough. Is that in fact, this is in some ways lower risk than some other types of ventures. Another thing is just to stress that it is innovative. It's been done before, but this is still highly innovative. This doesn't come across our desk often. And it came across our desk just last week or the week before. And so this is for our board's first introduction to Cambridge Academy, with the potential for our board to look at this innovative process again in November. In fact, you'll hear a suggested motion later on. I have learned in talking with their leader, Stan, who you're going to hear from soon, and some of you may know, but they have the potential to be a high-achieving school where student outcomes are the highest in the community, the state, and the nation. That's what they put forward. They also have the potential to be a strong collaborator with the Utah State Board of Education. All of our schools collaborate and work with the Utah State Board of Education. But what we heard was a real commitment to glean the resources of the Utah State Board. So we wanted to point that out to our board here. It also should be noted that much time, energy, and resource has already been spent and committed for this. They've gone through a rigorous 6-stage process with their current authorizer. And so therefore, it's not like this is their first presentation. This is in fact, they're deep into this process with time, with energy and resource. They hit some issues in September, okay? That's what kind of led them to our board's discussion here. The first being a campus and building. The campus and building was moving forward with a developer, and then really we're talking 11th hour, maybe 11:45 hour, that it just didn't work out. It didn't materialize for whatever reason. Sometimes it's hard to know what those reasons are, but it didn't materialize. So the time, the energy, the resources that went into a campus and building fell short just in September, okay? The other thing is that their authorizer, when they asked, Cambridge Academy asked for an extension, they did informally in an email, but it was still definitely a strong communication, say, you won't be granted an extension. And so I'm going to turn to and so they had to deal with that in September. That was middle of September, late September, if my memory serves me. If we go to the next slide, and I'm nearly done, and then we'd love to hear from Cambridge Academy directly. We do have the support from the current authorizer to do this. Cambridge Academy has the support. We verified as staff, Marie has called, Ms. Stephenson has called and talked through, and they are ready to officially put to paper any documentation or anything that might be necessary to make this transfer. That's important. There are some additional concepts and ideas. Remember, it just happened in September, but already this board and their leader, Stan, has been starting to think about concepts and ideas for where they can go after the fallout. And so that's where maybe between October and November, maybe our board entertains the idea of letting them continue to explore their options. We find that the enrollment projections are now conservative, kind of in a stepped up fashion, rather than just 3,500. Our board has had consternation over big numbers right off the bat. They were coming up with that. We kind of coached with them on that, talked that through with them. And so we do see some conservative enrollment projections that kind of step into a higher number. We also think that the opening date could be set for the fall of 2026 rather than the fall of 2025. Reduces the pressure of like enrollment and marketing and all the work that they need to do. The law, rule, and policy, as their staff and our staff reviewed, do not say much, if anything, to this matter, making it allowable. Marie will talk about next steps after Cambridge Academy's presentation to us, and then I'll provide a recommended motion only for our board. It's just for your recommendation and for your consideration. So Chair Bowles, that's the opening part of this, and now our idea, and we've been working with Cambridge Academy for their own presents to give us some information.
Fabulous. Let's move right to that then. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for your willingness to listen to us today. I'm Stan Lockhart, a longtime person involved in not only education, but in government in the state of Utah. I have on my left I'm the chair of the board. Our vice chair is Laura Warburton. She's a behavioral health expert out of Weber County. We also have with me Richard Holt, who's one of our board members, and his day job as an auditor for the LDS Church. We have 3 other board members who couldn't be here today, but they're here in spirit, and they may even be online. I don't know. They said they tried to do them. Yeah. I am the product of 2 educators. My dad retired as a superintendent in the state of Washington many years ago, and my mother taught K-3 in between raising a family of 6 kids. And I grew up in a home where we believe that education is a noble profession, maybe the noblest, because we're preparing for the future of our society. And so I've always had an interest, and of course, as we had kids and they grew up, I participated in their education, and we sent them to district schools, and they got a great education. My daughter Hannah was a part of the first graduating class from Utah Academy, Utah County Academy of Science, UCAS, and she wears that with pride. And then my late wife Becky was in the legislature for 16 years and was Speaker of the House, and constantly involved in education. Even though the public doesn't always think this, education is the top priority of the legislature and our elected officials. I got to watch the birth of charters when we had the early college high schools back in I think it was 1999 that Governor Leavitt got the grant from the Gates Foundation, and we began this incredible experience of charter schools. Today, there's well over 100 charters in this state. But I long followed the charter school movement, and I had a desire to be involved in a charter. So in 2017, I got this idea that we should begin going down this road. By 2019, I chose USU mostly because my goal has always been the very best possible education for a child. And I know you hear that from every charter. That's every charter's goal. But there really is a science of learning. There really is a scaffolding that goes on in a child as they go from concept to concept to concept. And it's well documented. It's not like we have to go reinvent the wheel. And I work in my day job with the State Board of Education on a pretty regular basis. And they have experts. If you remember, Senator Milner a few years ago passed a bill that made a significant emphasis on reading by grade level in 3rd grade. Why? Because it's the best indicator of future success in both academics and profession. And so we have spent tons of money as a state and have tons of data on how kids learn how to read. So I want to use that in a charter. I want to take the very best practices that I can find. And we have, as you look at the charter, we talk about the type of curriculum we're going to employ. Recently, we've been talking about how to use reading coaches better, because what our state board has found is that may be the place that gets the biggest difference as they help kids learn how to read. But things like early warning system, the ability to remediate immediately when kids start falling behind is really important. Look, there's a lot, I don't want to go too deep into what we're going to do academically, but I can tell you that our SMART goals are to have 100% of our kids at grade level, or proficient in every class with reading and math. With US, in fact, the purpose in choosing USU was the idea that they could provide micro credentials that as we look at teachers in the classroom where they're in charge of pedagogy and classroom management and content knowledge, that we could upskill them so that we could have master teachers quicker in our classrooms. And we thought that USU as a partner could help us do that better than the state board, the state charter school board. As we went down this journey, we made formal application. Well, we started the 6-step process in 2019. By 2023, we had found some properties and were ready to go, but we needed a year delay in the charter that was approved in 2021. We went to the Board of Trustees and they rejected us at a time when we actually had found property and found a builder and were ready to start, and we got rejected for a year extension. And by the time we got approved 2 months later to restart, those properties were gone. We basically had to start over again. We thought we had found a partner in Daybreak. I can't think of a better place in the state to build a charter school than Daybreak, which is a master plan community. And the owner of that property, we negotiated with them for about 9 months and kind of got left at the altar at the 11th hour, like Dr. Kramer said. The state, Utah State University's Board of Trustees had told us not to come back when we finally got our approval. And we went back one time in between and they gave us a second approval. They were very good to us. And I can tell you the people that they have at School of the Future, I would put those educators up against anybody in the state in terms of the quality of experience and knowledge that they have with education. But it became clear to us that the Board of Trustees is focused on a university. These charters for them are kind of well, they're not a priority. They're not their highest priority. I know that for a fact. And so it became clear that we could no longer use Utah State in that way since we needed another extension, having not gotten the property that we needed. And look, property is a challenge. It is very expensive and interest rates are high. And one of the best practices we started with in consulting with our financial experts was we could spend 20% on operations, we could spend 30% on facilities, and 50% had to go to the education of our students in order for us to achieve our SMART goals. So we refused to spend more than that 30%. And so we had to have serious, it's not like every property owner and builder was willing to do that with us, but as we kind of worked through this, we've had limited options because we've been very, very careful to stay within those parameters. We're focused, look, if we can't get these types of results out of our kids, then we just don't want to be an average charter school. You will see in our charter that we've got some changes to the charter that was approved by Utah State University, above and beyond expanding out the geographical region. And that still may change farther because we're going to find a great location where we can purchase land and build a building within the 30% that we're targeting. But the other things that have changed, we had a 5-year program to get to 100% proficiency. We think that it's better to focus on year-to-year improvement, and we've given us a longer runway of 8 years to get there. We expect to be measured on those SMART goal results. We fully intend to have every child proficient in math and reading as they progress through our K-12 school. But it's going to take a while. There's no one else doing it in the state. There are very few that are coming close in the country. We have been following Success Academy in New York City, if you're familiar with them, trying to get insights into what they're doing to get up to about 95% proficiency. But we are highly focused on giving kids the kind of education that allow all of them to succeed and be contributing members of society.
Additional comments? Any of you?
Hi, I'm Laura. I'm a perfectionist. How are you? The reason why I accepted to be on the board for this charter was because of the man that's sitting next to me. I wanted to learn from him. I knew that he was going to be a phenomenal leader. Right there, my same goal was that I care about children tremendously. And if any of you know who I am or what I am all about, you know that I care about kids. And so I care about parents. I think it's a group effort, and that when we can bring good education, and not that that's not happening in this state, it is happening. It's happening at a phenomenal rate. I loved what I heard about this other charter school. And I looked at them up and I looked at their percentages and I handed over to him and I said, look at this. And I'm like, we're gonna do good. We're in the right spot. We're gonna get in there. We're gonna do good. So very grateful for this opportunity. I do think Utah State was a phenomenal partner and served us well. They demanded from us, they demanded high standards from us, and I appreciated that. They brought Success Academy in. They actually brought them in, and we sat in a room about this size being taught by them. We have studied their books, we have learned, we are definitely teachable. And I like that about this group too. I think there's a lot of education in this room to be learned from. I think it's the right time to step away from them as well. I think stepping away, it's like a good friend. You may have had them for a long time, but something is not right or not right anymore and you have to go. And that's okay. You love them, you thank them, and you move on. And so I think this right here will open up doors to us being able to create the physical facilities that couldn't before. So I'm excited about that. We've got tremendous partners behind us now that are ready to go. So take a chance on this.
Richard, anything?
I'm committed. Obviously, I'm not an educator. CPAs don't have a lot of expertise in education. But financially, I'm committed to what we're trying to do in the mechanics of the way these things can work. We're projecting and hoping to achieve. So just committed to the information. Right?
We do love educators and people who are passionate about education, but I have to tell you, we do need CPAs. Because that's not always, we're so engaged with kids, we sometimes forget, oh, we also have to care about money and buildings, and we have to care about marketing in this environment as well. Some things that we don't always have that expertise in. So it's important to have CPAs with us as well. May I first go to board members and see if there are questions that board members might have, things you'd like to talk about before we move to a recommendation. So, Member Cisneros.
Are we voting today, or this is
No.
just a first pass?
First pass.
Okay. I do chair though, if I,
Yes.
okay. So I feel like the why has been glossed over. And I would like specifics. I feel like we're talking in very, very general terms about why. So why developer issues? Why did Utah State say no? If you're a good bet and a good risk, they would logically want to be with you for the long haul. And you know, there's already 3 charter schools that operate in Daybreak. So why Daybreak, and where do you plan to move to now? Why now? Why would we not hear this in January with the rest of the processes? It sounds like if we're asking for an extension, then there shouldn't be any kind of hurry. So I'm hearing very general statements about things, but I'm not hearing any specific. So I would like to hear very, very specific reasons and address it in specificity, please.
Which one would you like me to start with?
Let's start with what I have at top, why developer issues?
So at one point in time, in March of 2023, as we had gotten approvals and we were moving forward, we actually had land and had developers ready to go. The Board of Trustees at Utah State declined to give us an extension to the fall of 2024. That was the beginning of the challenges that we faced with property developers. When they said no, and they didn't say no, it had very little to do with us. It had more about questions they had about why they should be chartering, why they should be authorizing charters. And it was and there were some new faces on that board who hadn't been a part of the discussion to originally authorize charters. And it really, almost the entire conversation had nothing to do with us and everything to do with should Utah State University be authorizing charters. And that's why they said no. The presentation was weak. We didn't do it. The School of the Future is the one that gave the presentation, but the board said the presentation was weak. And that's why they turned us down. But in turning us down, those plans on property and building immediately went away because we no longer had a pathway to open it. And it took 60 days of additional discussions with the Board of Trustees for us to get that turned on again. And by the time it got turned on, those opportunities were no longer available. And that really is where where things went south. And at the time, and those properties were not in Daybreak. Daybreak was the next phase where we went out and we did another search for property. And that's when we came up with Daybreak. And actually, originally we had about a dozen options. The Daybreak seemed like such a great option. They did a survey in the community because part of what we do is a marketing study. They did a survey in the community and the community said, we want a charter school option in Daybreak. And there isn't a charter school in Daybreak. There are around Daybreak. So I mean, at least that's what we were told by the people.
Oh, well, I was a principal at one in literally in
Inside
Daybreak
Daybreak.
and my child went to one.
Okay.
So I'm just saying, so
Yeah.
that's, I find that answer interesting because it seems like you would have a difficult, do you know what I mean? Like the cannibalism would be an odd
Yeah, well,
choice, yeah.
we were working with the owners of the property and together we were trying to assess the market need. The middle of September, we had been very, very patient as we kept working with the owner of the property to finish all the documents necessary to move forward. And it's really days before we kind of gave them here's the final date we have to have an answer. And 3 days before that final board meeting, they said it. And so now we're at a place where we've been told, and we went back to Utah State and said, here's what happened. Do you still want us? And they said, no, we prefer that you go look for other options. So that's why we're here.
Did they cite a reason in this last round for?
Yes, because we weren't able to come up with a location in the time that they gave us to come up with one.
If it helps. Sure, if it helps, can I add one thing?
Certainly.
Just, I do know that, their current authorizer would be prepared to make an official statement regarding why they didn't approve the waiver. They just didn't have the time. So we were left with an email right now. It was a formal, semi-formal correspondence. So I just want to put it out there. They just would need more time to officially put something out there.
We still have a very positive relationship with Utah State University. I believe we'll still use School of the Future with some of the original ideas we had on how we could have them help us upskill our teachers.
Of course, we understand there's a difference between Schools of the Future and the Board of Trustees of Utah
That's
State
the issue.
University. And if Utah State University wants to get out of the charter authorizing business, then that's puts that Schools of the Future kind of in a tough place. Member Cisneros, you had additional questions. I don't want to go past until you've had the responses that you're looking for.
So maybe cart before the horse, and you have a metric, it sounds of about 30% facilities costs. So where's your plan to look next to meet that? And again, that might be cart before the horse. It might not even be worth looking at if you don't have a charter, but.
I would just tell you, we're committed to that. If we cannot find a location that allows us to only spend 30% of our revenues on facilities, then we will not open.
So can I ask where that metric came from?
It came from a charter school developer, and I can't remember which one right on the early on in our formation of the school, as we talked to various developers. We had several experiences that have built schools around the country, and one of them said to us 30% is the standard. 20% on operations, 30% on facilities, 50% on the education of the students.
The next question though, Chair, was actually asked more staff. The desire to hear it quickly as opposed to maybe sliding it in January with other applications, and especially since it doesn't look like we're in super big hurry on this. My question, if we do it outside of the prescribed process, is what is the consequence to our other applicants, especially those who went through the process, if we say, let's go ahead and bring on and authorize a very large school with a to be determined market, that could have potential ramifications to schools that are in our pipeline to being approved. So that's probably more of a staff question than.
Let me respond first, because that's the reason we put it on the agenda. So at least the consent for it to be on the agenda. And then if staff has additional response to that as well. So this is not an internal process. So that was my first thing here as well. We looked at schools, we were interested in additional applications. That goes through the process in January. This is not the same situation because it is an already authorized school. It's not a school that we would consider for authorization. They have already been authorized. The state has already planned funding for them. They are already in the state pipeline, which makes them different from our other applicants that we will be considering in January. Now, relative to our consideration, relative to location and things, I think your point is well taken. You know, we have to consider that because, well, will it impact markets? And in putting on the agenda, our thinking from the executive committee at least was not that this should impede any decisions that we make regular to our application process, that this was a separate school that is already pre-authorized. So it was a little different situation. And there isn't a huge rush, but because in order, except that, I think in order for them to continue looking for land or for locations, they have to know that this charter school is, that it's solid, that it's going to continue, as opposed to saying we're not going to. It's not going to be authorized. That's the question. I don't know if staff.
Oh, that was
additional.
really well stated. Appreciate it. And then one other consideration that staff had is just always trying to keep the administrative burden of any operators or potential operators at a minimum. And we do recognize the rigorous process that this team here has gone through to be authorized already. So when we look at the time, the energy and the resources, we potentially request to duplicate those efforts. Just as staff, we thought in conversation with the executive committee is let this board hear and be introduced to this topic, consider something that's different and innovative in many ways. And so that was just another consideration.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you.
So part of the thinking too, I'll tell you, though we're always mindful of all of our schools and should be, because we have our partnerships with all of them. I also didn't want to mix this school that is a different situation with our regular process because it's not. So I did partly not doing it in January, putting in January kind of mixes it with that process. And it really is a separate issue in my estimation, so. Additional things, Member Cisneros, any additional?
No, thank you for
Okay.
indulging me.
Other board members? Yeah, Mr. Becerra.
Thank you. Grateful that you're here today. This is so interesting. I appreciate, in my day job, I work with early stage charter schools and, so as I'm looking through this, I just know you've been through a long process. You've heard a lot of no's. You've developed some scars. It's a big lift. But one of the key things I look at in the ecosystem of startup charter schools is the leadership team. And your resumes and your background with the arts. So I'm intrigued. I don't think you should be deracinated. I don't think you should be pulled up by the roots. I'm inclined to think that. When a harsh word. It's probably not quite the right context. Deracinated. So I think you're looking for a lifeline, right? If I were going to re-describe this, you've unfortunately have your current authorizer, which has said this is as far as we'll go. And that authorization is your key to be able to go to the community and say, we have access to revenues.
If you say no, we're done.
Yeah, so I can appreciate that. Can I just ask a little bit about, it was touched on here, just your numbers. I think I heard 3,500 and then I'm looking here, it looks like, at least from what I'm seeing, your opening enrollment target would be around 1,800, mostly K through 6 and a little bit as you grow. Can you just walk through why and how you've come to that? And let me just start by saying, just so I'm candid, that's a big number. I'm gonna guess you're all aware enough in this process, you know that's a big number. You would open as one of the biggest charter schools in the state. And so I guess I'll just offer you kind of my perspective here. I just want to understand yours too. You know, that number, especially with growth anticipated beyond it, would require probably 15, 20 acres.
We're looking for 40.
Yeah. So, and south, you know, the south part of Salt Lake County, I mean, buildable acres are what, 400,000 to 600,000 an acre, I think.
We're like 1 million.
Yeah. So it just becomes daunting very quickly.
Yeah.
Some of that may drive to make us feasible financially. We have to hit a certain core number, which might be bigger than other schools in the past. The other side of that coin though is kind of just goes back to the ability to recruit those kids, which I'm sure you're passionate about. I'm going to guess you're going to respond like, we will get the kids, because that's what I would expect. But yeah, just like to understand that, because that would be something I'd really want to understand. Opening that big is, I don't know if I'll say concern, but it's in the concern category. So let me just see if you could respond to that.
The key to success is finding good partners. So we have to have a marketing team that is experienced at doing this, that has done it many times before. And we have a marketing team that we believe has shown that they can do it enough times that we'll be able to do that again. We can't do it for 2025 because you have to start in August. You have to start when the last school year started with your marketing in order to be ready for kids to start signing up in January, February, March of the year when you want to sign up. Right? But we're not doing it alone. We're going to be doing it with them. And so that gives us confidence that we'll be able to meet our goals. And if we start with fewer students, then you're right, we're going to have trouble getting within that 30%. So we're committed to our goals. We don't plan on doing this unless we hit the goals that we've got. But to your point, I agree. We're doing this at scale. We're not doing this in a small way. And in order to get the type of results that we want, in the environment that we want. That's why we suggested the larger number.
Have you gone back and forth on perhaps, and even, it sounds like you're kind of from 35, you're down to 11. Have you looked at smaller? Have you looked, how did you arrive here?
Yeah, so we can start smaller. The reason we're where we're at has something to do with finances, as well as with the with the program that we're offering. And in order to get to the financial goals, we have to go a little larger than we otherwise would want. If land prices were less expensive, if the interest rates were lower, then I think we could start with a lower number. But some of this just has to do with how do you pencil it out? And that's why you've got the proposal you've got. Today, we're kind of in this what if. So if you're saying, please go look and see if you can maybe start with something much less and ramp up over time, we're open to that idea.
Yeah, I know, I mean, I've looked at numbers like this and it is dumb.
You know our dilemma.
Yeah, it's tough. I can appreciate, to be viable, you've got to be financially viable. To be strong, you got to have strong operational strengths, and those kind of almost play, it's like hitting the gas and the brakes a little bit, right? So you got to calibrate that Goldilocks spot. But that is challenging. Yeah, I think if you're open, it's good to hear you're open to flexibility on opening. I suspect, I guess I would just, nudge you to think about being flexible. That's all.
What I'd like, I don't want to read too much into this discussion, but I think it might be worthwhile to have some discussions offline and get what some of your more detailed thoughts are regarding.
Yeah. Sure. No, that's great. Thank you. And I'm happy to do that. You bet. Okay, I just have one more kind of category then. So have you identified your partners already? You've mentioned a developer, you mentioned some costs. I would love to, maybe provide some further information offline, but are you committed to that? Are you kind of still open to the world as far as pivoting? Where are you as far as like kind of your partners in that process?
Yeah, I think we're pretty, our partners have been committed to us for we've been on this road for 5 years. As we found partners, we brought them in and said, please help us. Dave Robertson, our financial advisor with Young, Lewis and Birmingham, is very, very good. And he's signed up.
Yeah, they're great for
right. So we've got good advisors and good partners right now. I don't think that's the issue. I think our real issue is first of all, find a home, and second of all, how do you find property and get it built at the right cost structure and open in fall 2026. And we believe we can have some answers for you by the next board meeting.
I think that's all I have.
Other board members? Like you, Vice Chair Phillips.
Well, first of all, I find this very exciting. The reasons I do are first that Utah State has a very robust authorizing process that's been approved by the USBE, and ours is robust. And I would say, not to brag ourselves up, but I think those are the two most robust authorizing systems in the state. And so I have respect for the process you've been through. I have respect for Utah State, which is very picky about the schools that it wants to invest in. And so I don't have a lot of heartburn over that. I share the need to be flexible on numbers only because if we were to point to one area that has caused school closures, charter school closures more than any other over the last 25 years, it would be financial struggles, and most of those are attendant to enrollment that falls short of planned enrollment, so that if there had been a more gradual and moderate stepped plan toward building even where there's been phased building based on enrollment so that it's a little more planned. That probably would have saved some of our charters that have closed that actually had a lot of potential in terms of their curriculum and programs, but just weren't financially viable. But the other thing, and I'm going to put Stan on the spot, and I can do that because he and I, though we're not relatives and you know, my son didn't marry his daughter or anything like that. We served together on Lone Peak Hospital Board, and I feel like I have a knowledge of his capacity as a leader, and I appreciate that capacity so much. And I know he's gathered a great team around him. And I respect the work that his late wife did at the legislative level, and the work that he's done with legislators to bring consensus on certain important issues and good policy. So I really love the leadership team here. I have a lot of confidence, and we know as a board that makes all the difference because you're open-minded, you are flexible, you're willing to listen to people who have expertise, you know, such as our board member Biesinger does and others. The thing I want to put you on the spot on is Stan, in all transparency, Stan contacted me initially just because we have each other's numbers, right, from our previous service on this other board and things like that. And one of the things I really liked about this leadership team's pivot to the state charter school board is I fully believe, and Stan expressed this to me, and the reason I'm saying this in front of Stan, so he can correct the way I'm summarizing it if he wants to, okay? But I don't think that I think this school would have decided not to pursue opening if our board hadn't become in the last couple of years, the board it has become, which is innovative, which is a board that welcomes, that isn't afraid of processes that don't exactly fit into maybe a certain pattern we've established in the past, and also has emphasized the bilateral relationship that we want with our schools, which is exactly the kind of relationship, at least in the past, it sounds like they're moving away from it, just authorizing in general, but that Utah State has had with its schools, you know, supporting them in technical ways. That is why this group was brought to Utah State as an authorizer. And that is the kind of board we have and are becoming. And so you know, as we talked, this board in its focus on its relationships between or among the charters it authorizes, but between the board and the charters it authorizes, suddenly became an option for this school, not just because Utah State said no a couple times on an extension. I don't think this would have been the board that they looked to. So I'm pleased. I wanted to make sure our board members understood that the kind of board that we now are in terms of providing the technical support and the bilateral relationship, I think is what even gave this group, this board, this sort of applicant board, if you will, a reason to look toward us. So did I reflect that properly, Sam?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, and then the other thing is, I do think it's a very different thing. The process and timing we have for our new schools with the proposal, then the invitation for a full application, has everything to do with not only letting us really do our research as we get the different phases of those schools' proposals, but then alert the USBE for that funding. And we have to have that. It's very difficult, as you know, when a school that has never been authorized asks for that process to be expedited because of the funding. We have to plan for it. We don't want it to negatively impact in that first allocation other schools that we may be authorizing or enrollment that may be higher or lower than we think it's going to be and that the state thinks it's going to be. But in this case, this school the USB has already been noticed for a long time now that this school is coming on board at some point. They get notices of the delay, but the money is planned for this school. And so I do think, and I concurred with Chair Bowles, that this is something different. We have a school that's been authorized. We have an authorizer that says, we don't think we want to be in the authorizer business anymore. They've gone through a good process. And we have a school, and we also have an authorizer that doesn't want to keep extending. We're a little more flexible in that regard. We do that if we think there's a reason for it. And we authorize a lot of schools. We're not out of the authorizer business and we're not transitioning out of the authorizer business. So I do like the idea of us considering this school as a school that should be considered outside of the normal process because it has been authorized by a reputable authorizer. And it's gone through a very rigorous process, has been found to be to meet all criteria with the exception of the land and building, and this is a very difficult thing to do in this particular climate. Economically, the land and construction in our state is at all-time highs. And it's just hard, right? I remind the board that we gave Beehive an extension, one of our best schools that we authorized in terms of its academic outcome. We gave them all kinds of extensions for this very same reason. And it's something that for which we ought to give an extension. Obviously, this isn't our authorized school yet, but it's something that we have set a precedent for when we have a good school. Now, in that case, they were expanding, not being authorized initially by us, but nevertheless, it was a similar problem, just things falling through and finally being able to find the old Shopco right there on 9400 in Sandy. So what I think that we should at some point, think about, and obviously not today because we want to have the time to think about it, is whether or not this is a school we want in our portfolio, an already authorized school that would need to meet with our staff and discuss that enrollment number issue because it's worrisome too. We don't like to authorize a school that we then know might really struggle financially because of too ambitious and optimistic and enrollment numbers. And especially in a declining demographic of school age children, that's something that we're experiencing as well. So we want to be smart about the way we plan for that. But I'm very excited at the prospect that we could add this school to our portfolio. So I just wanted to put my support for our very high consideration of that possibility out to the board. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Chair, may I, Mr. Cisneros, you have an additional?
Well, I think there was some misunderstanding about my concern of the January of articulating
Okay.
what my concern is.
Go ahead.
We're working on the assumption that we would have ever authorized. We're saying an authorized
true.
school, but we're working off the assumption that this board would have ever been interested in this idea
Well
to
said.
begin with. And so that's unfair against the schools who we are considering from scratch. But because we also don't have a market, they did not, which I understand, cart before the horse, but we don't have a market with which to compare other schools in markets that for whatever reason, we've said no, either because of the market or the number or the idea. And if they're hitting that, that's fantastic that Utah State said yes, but we can't assume we would have ever said yes to the initial authorization. That's my concern of going out of process.
Thank you. And my response was just to the timeline, but I think your point is well taken. I had two things written down. I'm going to echo, I think, probably what everyone else has said around enrollment and location. And so I'm going to echo those same things. And why do we do that? Not because we're saying, no, your enrollment is unrealistic or, well, partly that, but I'm in this way. Not that you're not doing a good job, but in this way, we have enough experience with more than 100 schools and having authorized annually additional schools that we know from experience, and others have said the same thing. So I'm just summarizing. We want any school we authorize to be a success. Our commitments, once we've authorized, we partner, we sign together agreements, we want you to succeed 100%. We're at that point where we really want you to succeed. But we know that opening with it to help you succeed. True. So we really, that is a big concern. 1800 is even a big school. That's a big school. To know the kids, know the families, and to just to have that many is a big school. And we also know you do it because financially you need numbers in order to generate the funds in order to make the school work. That's a concern. Having a location, and it is kind of what Member Cisneros saying, cart before the horse a little bit, but when you do a market study, you have to do a market study in the area in which you will draw that market, right? And if you don't know the location yet, you really can't do the market study yet to say, is this going to be a viable school that individuals want and will support here, so that we can generate the number. So we do, I'm gonna echo what I think others have said. We need some additional time together to talk about what would be the right numbers, and can you, even in your eventual planning, we know we can affect thousands of kids, and we want them to have the best educational opportunity. We may have to start like this, even though this is our eventual goal. How can we ramp up over time so we build a core piece and that allows additional building onto it? Or we have, we have the potential of the land, but we just don't have the brick and mortar investment at this point, so that we can do it a little over time. So there's some things like that to consider. Only we say that because from the best intent, we won't want you to succeed. We want this school to be a viable option, because I'm going to agree with Vice Chair Phillips. Kids who would come to this school would benefit. They would benefit, they would succeed, but they're not going to be able to come to this school and succeed if the school is not viable and can't stay open. And it's, you can't make it work with that number. So that sometimes takes ramping up and overtime, and we maybe should have some additional discussion. All right, with that, and I think I've just summarized what a lot of others have said, but we all are seeing the same thing, which they're common themes to look at, just based on our experience and what we've looked at before, just to be mindful of. Go ahead and make a comment, and then immediately after that comment, I would entertain your
I'll finish
recommendation
that,
of
yeah.
motion, and we could consider. Go ahead.
Two questions that I'm not sure that you can fully answer right now, but two questions. One, where do you see holes in the state that need charters, and especially charters of this kind of caliber?
Good question.
We can work with staff on this.
I know,
Yeah,
just,
we'll work,
okay.
but that's a good question.
Yeah, I just want you to know
Well
that I'm
said.
thinking about that I'm open to that.
Yeah,
And the other question would, and again, probably work with staff, what numbers do you see most successful that you start with? I would like to hear both those. at
also
some point.
good question.
Okay.
We will work
Yeah.
with staff.
Yep,
You're thinking in the right way. And by asking those questions, I know you're thinking in the right direction.
good,
And those are our foundational questions that will help you to succeed.
great.
And we know that your hearts are in the right place. And we know Stan's done this work for a lot of years, and we know that in that work. And former speaker Lockhart did as well, even though her profession was in health professions, she was a strong supporter of education, and we know that's just in your family DNA in the work that you do. So we appreciate that. So I'm ready for summary and potential.
Yep,
suggestions.
can be brief. I think on this, as we close out, a couple of corrections to this slide here. It should say enrollment projections are now more conservative. Because we had 3,500, but we've been working for a week and a half, 2 weeks, having regular meetings. So to go from 3,500 to 1,800 is more conservative. You're hearing the questions, you're hearing the openness to continuing to look at enrollment projections differently, perhaps. So that's a correction there. It should have said now more conservative. The second correction that I have to my slide here is we really don't need a motion. In fact, this agenda item was not lined up for a motion. I don't think. The board can always do a motion, but just we're devoting resources as staff. We have been for a week and a half. So just some sort of like, if the discussion leans us towards that, we can continue to devote resources to this endeavor. So that we can bring more additional information. There are a lot more materials that the board would need to consider for this. There are other things. And then, so I wanted to bring that up, is that we're just looking for not necessarily a motion, but in good faith, we want to make sure that we're putting our resources, your resources forward in the right places. And so I think getting that some sort of guidance on that from the board, even if it's not a motion, would be helpful.
Yeah,
So,
direction moving forward, more than a motion, but at least our direction. It could be a motion, but what's our direction? Vice Chair Phillips.
I've been thinking, as I always do, about what other members have said, in this case, Member Cisneros. And I just have a question for staff. It's my understanding, actually two, because one's a law and one's a finances. It's my understanding that the State Charter School Board distributes all startup funds to new charter schools, regardless of the authorizer.
do.
So in a sense, the startup funds for this school would have been already earmarked at some point. We get notified of any school that's been authorized by another authorizer and the potential funds going to that school. So technically speaking, and I get, maybe if we had 15 applications we were looking at in January or something, but if I don't think it, whether or not we decide to authorize this school really has much of an impact on the startup funds we might have directed to another school, given that they were already authorized and given that we have really just a very little small group coming to us in January. I just want to make sure, it seems to me that that's kind of a, that suggesting there's sort of a cap or a limit. It sounds like we could authorize this school and that every single school that's coming toward us, not that we're going to do that, but that's coming forward in January and not have a financial hardship there. Is that accurate?
I do think that's accurate, yep.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, it's because I want to make sure that we,
Yep.
I don't want us to feel it as we're considering the schools that we've done a bait and switch with the schools that we.
That's an either or.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like it's an either or, is that right? And then the other thing is, I know this is true of districts in law. I don't know if it's true of other charters. I think in spirit it would be, but I don't think we're allowed as an authorizer, any authorizer, state charter school board or other authorizers, to consider in our decision the impact it might have on certainly at least other districts opening a charter school in an area. And of course, we would want to know, I want to say firmly, I would want to know where you were opening, because I think what other members have said about being able to actually weigh and judge whether, and even have a market analysis if you don't even know where you're opening, right? That's hard for us and it's hard for you. But I think we are disallowed
Correct.
to even consider that actually,
Correct.
because we were the charter section of law was, hey, this is all about competition. This is all about choice.
Right.
And some will fail and some will succeed, and some of that will be within our control to help, and others of it will be out of our control to help. But we're not to say, well, we've got, it doesn't sound like you're going to Daybreak, but there are charters in Daybreak, so we can't authorize the school in Daybreak. That can't be something we even think about, right? It does have to be something you think about when you're doing your market study, because you have to decide whether you're going to be financially viable. But I just want to make sure we know we have parameters under which we can consider these sorts of things, financial and legal and ethical, and so on. But those at least are areas that sounds like the financial impact, even were we to authorize this school in terms of startup funds, since it's already been authorized, and since those funds are distributed to all new schools through us, regardless of who the authorizer is, and so they would have been earmarked and planned for, as well as the fact that we only invited a very small number for January. So we could conceivably authorize everybody and still be within our financial. Just want to make sure, okay. Because that's something I think we should not.
I think we're not prohibited, but maybe the better question is the question that was asked about where would be a good place.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
where might
Absolutely.
those good places.
We'll work with them.
So my comment, Chair, would be two parts. One, I would benefit as a new member of this board from a further discussion on the parameter you just brought up. I know that Director Kramer brought that up in the August meeting, that, things we need to consider and things just guidance on consideration. I personally, I'm just trying to figure out in my brain, like, if you have 6 gas stations in a half a block, I don't know if it's smart to build a 7th gas station there. And I'm not sure how we just ignore some of that data, but I would benefit from having that discussion, understanding what the law and that would be helpful for me for further discussions. Having said that, I think if the question is on the table, do we take the finite amount of resources and deploy it towards further interaction, support, discussion with the school? I'm definitely for that. I think this is a great group. I think their heart, their resume, their background, the fact that they've been into this for a number of years, and the fact that they really need help. Like, I've seen schools at this point, and it is a brutal place to be. Like, they're really looking for a lifeline here. And I don't think that that should sway,
it doesn't mean that I'm not saying it's a full yes, but I do think it should be considered. And if the idea today was to introduce this and then give direction, I'm supportive of that. I think that this represents an opportunity where the future of education will bend to and benefit from, and I think it would be an appropriate use of resources.
Chair, I'd like to echo that. I think I've heard enough here today that it does warrant a little more exploration, more discussion. And I'm happy to support more time to learn some of the things that we've talked about today. So thank you for saying that so succinctly.
With that in mind, unless I hear an objection to the contrary, I'm going to, we will eventually have to take a motion, but this is not the right time. But at this point, I'm hearing that we're directing staff and to use resources among this, any board members or others beyond as you need it, but to continue discussions with Cambridge Preparatory Academy, continue discussions that we're not at a no place, we're at a let's keep talking place and see what we can do. And if this can be a viable option, and let's look at it and bring it back. I don't know if between now and November, maybe not enough time, and December is a difficult time. I hate to mix it in with our January process. That was partly why you did that today. Say it
The
again.
timeline is laid out in board vote, so.
Oh, so talk to me about the timeline.
Our 277-552 section 7 lists out, there's different 30-day windows and 60-day windows. So if we're proceeding forward, staff can work with Cambridge, with their previous authorizer, or any of the state board to meet those different timelines and bring you back
Thank
the
you.
required
That
documents.
answers that question. Okay, so
That was our
Unless-
next step.
unless I hear an objection, I believe that's the direction from the board is we're interested to continue conversations.
Thank you.
And so to take in mind some of the things you've heard today. Thank you for
Thank you very
coming
much.
today. We appreciate being with you. Debbie, I'm gonna ask you this question. Are you in a hurry? Do you have a commitment?
Shannon does. She
All right, let's get- let's-
11:45.
Thank you.
Board,
Okay.
we're a little bit behind, and if you don't mind, let's hang on. And this is really an upbeat place before we take a little break. And so, even though we're behind, we appreciate you holding on. Come on up with us. I think we kind of know generally, but we want to do it officially. And we're very excited for this great opportunity you're bringing to the state of Utah. And we really do appreciate UAPCS and hard work to write. If you've ever written a grant for the Department of Education,
Marie.
I'm not sharing right now.
So, yeah, is there a way for Shannon to share? If not, Gina has her.
And if you're okay, Chair Bowles, I got 3 minutes of intro, not long for this agenda item.
Oh, yeah, try, have Shannon try.
To
She's
Shannon is
online.
Yes.
I see Shannon.
Ready for me to share?
And there, through the whole first of our meeting, thank you, Shannon, for hanging on.
There we go.
And Shannon, I understand you did a lot of that work that made this happen. So,
Sure.
It was a team
um,
effort.
We want you to be involved. Yeah, all right. So this is Debbie, your presentation, UAPCS, right?
Yeah, I got a quick thing, not long. I'll keep it really short.
Thank you.
Yep. The State Charter School Board provided a letter of support for this CSP grant through the UAPCS. And so that was a letter that Chair Bowles sent over to the association. We received updates and then a call from your leader, Royce Van Tessel, and then talked to Shannon and others in giving congratulations both to UAPCS and Utah Public Charter Schools as a whole. There was a public announcement that went out. You should look at the press release. It's well written, but the State Charter School Board Executive Committee also thought that it'd be our responsibility to provide a transparent opportunity to communicate what this is. And so that's why, to your bidding, Chair Bowles, Vice Chair Phillips, we invited them here to be here today so that we could transparently get this information out to the public.
Thank you. And that's an important thing. for folks to know them, what mischief you've been up to.
It's all yours.
But good mischief.
Really appreciate your support too, and Shannon's going to be driving the train.
Okay, Shannon,
And can you hear me okay?
Shannon, you're muted.
She's not. I don't think she just.
No,
She might
No.
have just turned herself up.
somehow we're not getting the sound.
It could be
here,
a
though.
technology thing, so bear with us for a moment.
Oh, that.
Are we?
I just seen it.
Can you hear me now?
It looks like it's
We can
recording
get
her.
Shannon on my cell phone. I can put it on speakerphone. It's not.
That's
high tech,
great.
but it might work.
Shannon, the computer is hearing Shannon
Yeah.
because Shannon, it is recording. Can you
Right.
hear me now? But we have to tell you, our ears cannot unless other younger ears than mine can.
No, that's not.
She speaks in the child.
I have Debbie on my phone. Can you hear me
Shannon,
now?
we can't hear you at all from your computer. So I'm. just
Here, I
gonna
hear
put you
you
on-
all.
Now we can start to hear you.
I've
Here,
got
just
you on my
take-
phone. Can we set this up in the middle of the?
Yeah, if it doesn't give
Shannon-
feedback.
Mute yourself on the. Actually,
Mute,
Mute us, see if that works.
Would that be?
just mute, yep. And volume's all the way up.
does that work?
Still getting mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, better. Thank you.
I will work really hard to speak slowly so that the delay doesn't interfere with the presentation. But we're thrilled to be with you. We are super excited for this grant to have been awarded to us. It was a 12 to 18 month process and definitely a team effort, but we are so happy to be on this side of that and be able to start working with schools to help. So I have prepared some slides. I will move rather quickly through them because we do have a CSP meeting at noon. But if you would like to schedule time with myself, with Debbie or Royce to go into the weeds on some of this, we would be happy to do that for you if today's presentation doesn't cover it. So let's just jump right in. Okay, so the purpose of this grant is to support the creation and growth of high quality charter schools throughout the country. It is a pass-through grant. So we've received, entities like UAPCS received the monies. We will then, through a application process, award sub-grants to eligible applicants for the purpose of building new schools, expanding existing high-quality schools, and the replication of existing high-quality schools. And I have a slide a little bit later that will differentiate between those three categories. But the award was $44+ million to be used over the next 5 years. That grant of the $44 million plus, 90%, at least 90% of that must go towards new schools, expanding high quality. I'm getting feedback. Are you watching that too?
We are.
Let me see
is
if I
the
can.
speaker off on your computer?
Okay, is that better? All right. So of the 90.
I think if I maybe mute.
I put myself on mute and it's still doing that.
Yeah, give it a try. We're just, we're gonna take a break and just try to figure something out.
Sure.
Audio.
Okay, how's that? Now I can't hear you. But I'd be happy to continue with a thumbs up if you can hear me. And then I'll let Debbie answer any questions that you might have if it doesn't work for me to be able to hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you with no feedback.
You can now?
Yep, go ahead and continue.
Perfect. All right. I will continue. So as I was saying, with the 44 million plus dollars that we have, at least 90% of that money must be spent towards the development of new charter schools, expanding high quality schools, and replicating existing high quality schools. 7%, but no more, may be used in performance monitoring, training authorizers, support sector-wide training and things that will benefit all charter schools, and then our charter school director incubator program. And I'll talk more about those items in the next slide. And then we will retain 3% of that grant to administer it, to offer the technical assistance, the financial compliance, and all of the monitoring that goes into monitoring a federal grant will be taken care of in that 3%. We can spend less than 3% and less than 7%, but any extra monies would go back into the 90%. So let's talk briefly about what that. So we had, the grant was written with several priorities. The absolute priority was the support that we will be offering to charter school authorizers. The goal there is that will improve the authorizing throughout the state, which will then trickle down to the performance at the school level. Then the competitive preferences, those are, in a nutshell, those priorities will ensure that charter schools are high quality, that they're financially responsible, and that they're successful in serving students, specifically students from underserved categories or in areas where charter school, or excuse me, just high quality school options are limited. Bringing in charter schools into possibly rural areas or smaller demographics. And then the last is an invitational priority. And this one is exciting to us because I think it takes a look at the broader spectrum of education in general. So this invitational priority is going to allow us to establish collaborations between charter schools and district schools. And that would be sharing best practices, sharing great things that are happening, and increasing the level of educational opportunities throughout the state. So with those three priorities in mind, we will be working over the next 5 years to implement this grant. The next slide will talk a little bit about the timeline. So when we made the announcement that we received this grant, we got a lot of emails, a lot of well wishes, a lot of calls, and a lot of questions that came out of those. We're doing our best to be able to answer those questions and put processes, systems into place so that we can share this information with you. But here's a little bit of the timeline and award limitations that I wanted to share with you. So this state entity, the CSP state entity grant, is a 5-year grant cycle. Our subgrantees will have up to 5 years to spend the money that they are awarded. And to be honest, we will work hard and encourage them to spend that money in a shorter window, because the longer you draw something out, the more opportunities there are for error. And it's important to us as an association that we are very accurate and timely. So if the next component of that is that if you have a school that is awarded their money in their implementation stage, they only have 18 months of planning and design before they have to be using that. So for example, if we had a school that was approved in January, they would be eligible to apply for this grant in January of 2025. They would be eligible to apply for this grant, and they would have 18 months to be able to plan before they open their doors, which is a tight turnaround in the current timeframe that we have, but it does fit within the 18 months before they open. Eligible applicants can only receive one grant within that 5-year period, and no school can receive more than 2 million. They can receive up to 2 million, but not exceeding 2 million. And what that will look like for Utah, we will determine and then share broadly when we have that information. So now the next most common question is, what can you do with that money? So this slide is intended to give you a brief idea of what money can be spent on. And again, this is the 90% of that money that we've been awarded is intended to go towards opening and preparing new charter schools, opening and preparing replicated high quality schools, and expanding high quality schools. That money could be used for, and in Utah, we're very familiar with the term one-time funding. I just left a finance meeting where that was the topic of most of our conversation. So with that idea, I want you to, as we talk about some of these things, keep that in the back of your mind that this is intended to be one-time funding so that when the school opens and starts running and this money is no longer available to them, the school continues to function as intended. So that money can be used for things like recruiting, both teachers, students, for community engagement, for whatever that might look like. It can also be used for purchasing equipment. It can be used for purchasing technology or for purchasing curricula. It can also be used for training your teachers in that equipment and in that curriculum. That money can also be used for purchasing buses. If you've got a school that, in order for that school to be successful and to bring the students that they need, a bus will help them. That can be something that can be paid for out of this grant money. And then any other unforeseen things that would come with opening the building. Now, it cannot be used for the actual construction of the building and the things that are associated with ongoing maintenance of a building. So often, as we've met with, and we've been in meetings already with the state or with the federal Department of Education, they use several terms that we will now adopt at UAPCS as we communicate with our stakeholders. The terms that we will be using, and some of them we wanted to spend a minute today and just outline what those would be so that we all have this common understanding. The definition of a high quality charter school from the U.S. Department of Education would be a school that demonstrates strong academic performance. And those performance measurements are the things that would be determined by our state. They would have no major issues with things like finances, operations, compliance, legal things. They're following all laws, particularly state and federal, and school safety. They, as a high quality charter school, would show and demonstrate improvement in student academic growth. And in the case of high schools, you would see a really high or higher than the average graduation rate to be considered a high quality charter school. And they would also be looking at how those schools provide services and show academic achievement for students in underperforming or certain categories. And they've specifically outlined students in categories, race categories, income, special education status, and things like that. So my next slide is actually going to talk a little bit about the second term that they use on a regular basis, and that's underserved students. According to the government's documents, this list of 12 categories would be students that we would be looking to help support charter schools who want to grow to support these students in particular. And that's not a new list. I'm sure that many of you have seen that. So the other component is that we have agreed through this grant receival that we will encourage and be willing to distribute awards to schools who are looking at wide variety of geographical areas and educational approaches, which we feel like fits well with the model of Utah charter schools, that we're looking for schools of innovation and that we're looking for high quality access to schools in all areas of the state. The other piece, so if you, like me, like to have a process or a map, we have a 90-day onboarding process that we've begun engaging with the U.S. Department of Education. Over the course of the next 90 days, there will be dozens of trainings that we will participate in and engage with them. And in that process, we will develop our RFA application process. We will be creating policies and establishing the procedures on how we will run our program. We will also develop our selection process, and part of that will be identifying peer reviewers that will help vet those applications to ensure that we are providing schools money that have the highest opportunity to be successful. So we'll have some of that outlined and be able to share that specifically. We will also be hiring several key staff members because, as you imagine, and as you all know, monitoring grants, particularly of this size, will be a full-time responsibility for at least one, if not two, staff members. So we will be looking to hire and train key staff people to help us with this monitoring and grant process. At the conclusion, and our target is to have all of this stuff, all of these things and these systems in place by the beginning of the new year, so that as soon as the State Charter School Board has gone through their application process and determined which schools they will permit to move on, we will have a system in place to then open up our applications that they could then apply. Now, I want to go back really quickly to one of the competitive preference priorities, two of them actually, that we wrote into our grant, that we would provide training for the authorizers, which we've begun, but also we have developed, and this grant will help us to build this program, is a charter school director incubator program. So what we will be looking for next spring, those schools that will be opening in the 2026 school year will have the opportunity for their directors, if they've been identified, to apply for our incubator program. That incubator program will then allow that individual to spend a quarter at 4 different schools working alongside the executive director and allow them to have the opportunity to not only see the day-to-day, but also engage and take on responsibility and prepare them for the time when they step into their own school and open that following year. To me, that's one of the more exciting things that's going to come out of this grant process, and something that we will be able to finalize and share with you, possibly in the January meeting, if you would like to hear more about it at that time. So I know that you may have a lot of questions, and Debbie's there. Answering questions through the phone might be difficult. Debbie's there and could possibly answer more questions, but do you have any questions that we can quickly share answers to right now?
Just real quick. Where's the description? Like, there's this, like, in this process. Sorry, she made it look like hidden.
I think you can turn her off because now this is.
Okay. Oh, so
Just help me understand the discretion process of awarding money to a specific school. Who's over that? Who does that?
So there's strict parameters with the Department of Education for that. We've got to have there will be an application process. We will be paying peer reviewers for that. So that's fair. And the feds do require that schools meet key metrics. One of the things that wasn't brought up is this was enrollment preferences. We were talking about enrollment preferences that are allowed in Utah. The federal government does not recognize enrollment preference for board members. So there are things like that that we need to work through. They say you have an enrollment preference for charter school founders and teachers and different things. So there's a lot of things that we'll be needing to work with, probably with Paul and Marie, and to make sure that whatever check boxes we're allowed to have from the feds align with the check boxes that are allowed by the state. But they do have to be high performing schools and meet the metrics. There really isn't going to be a lot of latitude and subjectiveness. It's going to be a very objective and rigorous application. But there is a lot of money to go out to schools, and it's up to $2 million for new schools. For expansions, the maximum that we could go is $800,000. Again, those are the Department of Ed parameters, not ours, but our goal is just to support authorizers and support these schools and help alleviate a little bit of the financial burden. One of the things that I think Shannon hit this, but to reiterate, it cannot be built, purchase or build.
Can I ask my question a little different way? Because I think that was helpful for me. So if let's say I'm a new school, I would put an application. Is there a rubric by which if I meet a certain scoring system, then I know I would get an allocation? Or is there a body of people that say, we've looked at your application, thank you, and we've made this decision?
That's something that we'll figure out in our processes. My hope, and Shannon, just wave your arms if I'm speaking flying from the hip. We want to help as many schools as possible, but they do have to be high performing, or with their application, we can tell that they're going to open successful and be a successful high performing school. What we don't want to do is say, we're going to give you a giant pot of money and too bad, everybody else. Like, we really want to help grow charter schools in Utah, bottom line.
So my understanding of your question, and Shannon, correct me if I'm wrong too, it's a rubric evaluated by humans.
Yes.
Okay.
So there will be a rubric, it's still in development. But based on that criteria from the federal government, or like definitions of a high quality charter, that's kind of why we went through some of those things. And then evaluated by peer reviewers.
Okay,
So
okay.
kind of a combination.
And the number of peer reviewers is to be determined?
Everything is to be.
We
determined.
actually wrote that.
Oh, five,
Raising
Shannon
her
wrote
hand.
5.
Five.
Oh, flashing.
Yes,
Okay.
I know we
Excellent.
wrote that in
Five.
there, and they will be compensated for their time. That's
Thank you.
built into the budget. One of our biggest staffing needs, and Royce has already been interviewing people. We are looking to hire a financial controller with experience in public finance, state finance, federal reporting. And additionally looking for someone to kind of be a program coordinator to help do a lot of what Shannon is doing now. We can't clone Shannon. So we will be increasing our
She's a
staff.
unicorn.
She is. a unicorn.
I have just one more question. I don't want to dominate, but I asked for 2 million. Am I going to get a yes or no on what I asked for, or is there the ability to come back and say, we approve you, but we are going to approve you at 1.2 million? It basically haircut that back. Do we know the answer to that?
I think that might be a little bit premature until we get.
Okay,
our
to be
system
determined.
in place, to be
Can you
determined.
hear me at all?
Shannon is, I'll call Shannon back and put her on speaker.
She's trying, I can tell she's talking.
Yeah, I know, she did.
There we go. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, so Debbie's correct in saying that process and those policies will be laid out before we roll it out. However, there will be awards, like for example, if you're an expanding school and the base is 500,000 and you meet certain criteria, like you're opening in a rural school that doesn't have school choice, there would be additional funding available for that. So it could be up to a certain amount. That's why what we will most likely say in this process is up to a certain amount and up to 2 million. whatever that might be. But there will be, according to our competitive preferences, we will give preferences to schools serving underpopulated students and schools in areas where high quality charter schools or high quality education is limited. Does that answer your question? Perfect. I'll stay on, Debbie, in case there's more questions. So like Debbie mentioned, we are working really hard to put together all of those policies, those procedures, establish how we are going to run this program in our state. And over the course of the next 90 days, we will have more answers for you. In the meantime, if you have questions for us, or if you would like Debbie and I and Royce to meet with you, you can reach me at the contact information on the screen. And we would be more than happy to do a deeper dive and to talk about things like those priorities that we wrote in the grant, and the things like the weighted preference, and things that we didn't necessarily have time to really dive into today, and we are still putting process and systems in place. But with that, I am going to step away from this meeting and jump on the CSP budget meeting with the U.S. Department of Education. So it was lovely to meet with you. Thank you for being flexible and for working the technology for us. I do look forward to the opportunity when I can be with you in person and share more about this. So maybe that will be in January or sometime into the future. But thank you, and thanks for the good work and the hard things that you're doing for charter schools in Utah.
Thank you, Shannon. Director Kramer wants to say one more thing relative to this.
But a huge thing for Utah Public Charter Schools, there are a couple of implications that may be for this board to consider. One is that there may be a new school process timeline that works in conjunction. That is a possibility for this board to consider in the future. A data sharing method between the State Charter School Board and the UAPCS, something where they know who the applicants are and we know who they're talking to and they know who we're talking to. So some sort of data sharing. Recognize that an implication that this is competitive. This is a competitive grant. And then the last implication is that we potentially come up with a unified communication message to not change the funding for the startup grant in lieu of this new money being here for a 5-year period. So just let that sink in. Some may say you have 42 million now, you don't need the startup grant. This board's consideration is to consider that we do need that continued funding because it's sustainable and it's non-competitive. Those are just our closing implications. And we really appreciate your transparency throughout this, and congratulations.
We appreciate you guys. Your staff are so great to be supportive of this and to work with Shannon. It's just been singing your praises for the last several months. So thank you for that.
Thank you for taking the time to talk with us. This is a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, there are always pros and cons, right? There are those who say we should never take federal dollars because the Constitution's 10th Amendment says education is a state's right. It is not, federal government is not to impose on what we do in schools. But we take federal dollars all the time with IDEA and other dollars we have to. And so when we are accepting money from the federal government, it is with some parameters that we need to follow, and we use that money in good ways, especially in Utah. So thank you for presenting today and being with us. We so appreciate it. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's not news to anyone that we're a little bit behind, but we needed to do that. What I'm gonna ask is, can we move the OPMA training till after our lunch? And if you need a break, just continue. We're so close to lunch that you can have break and lunch kind of simultaneously. If we can continue, can we see what we can do relative to the next two items just prior to lunch? If we can
really get them done.
Okay, that's a deal.
Confident.
All right. So our 25-year event is also a big deal for us, and so we want to talk about that. And Director Kramer will give us some information updates.
Awesome. I'll make it brief, but it is exciting. 25 years in 2025. We've already brought this up once, but we just wanted to put out another reminder to our board, your attendance, your engagement, just celebrating with us. Because it is a celebration of Utah Public Charter Schools' legacy and future. The kickoff event, as a reminder, is Thursday, January 16th, and all board members would be honored guests at that event. The time is to be determined, but it's probably going to be 6:30 to 9:30. We're narrowing that down. It's going to be at the Natural History Museum of Utah, which is beautiful at the Utah campus, just offset and high up, high elevation. It's a beautiful venue. Those that are going to be there are those that have impacted the past work for the 25 years, those that are currently doing this great work, and those that are part of the future of Utah Public Charter Schools. Some of the details is that you'll get a nice plated dinner. There will be amazing speakers. One of our amazing speakers is Daryl Cobb, who is the president and CEO of the Charter School Growth Fund. And he is a dynamic speaker, a true leader, and he's likely going to speak to how we can serve more low-income students in Utah as we look towards the future, which is a nice association with what we just heard from this large grant. There also will be some other speakers and some entertainment. Be on the lookout for this branded save the date. You'll see it. It's got its own brand and its own logo and stuff like that. We think in the next 2 to 3 weeks, you're going to officially get a save the date with an RSVP, and then you'll get another actual invite. You can RSVP to either one of these things, but you're going to get 2 in the mail pieces of invite for this awesome event, 25 in 2025. And that's it.
Fabulous. Thank you. And true to your word, you kept it quick.
Kept it
Thank you
quick.
so much. But know that it's a regular board meeting day that day. Just know we're going to extend into the evening if you're able to. We won't have board meeting right up to the last minute, but just know that it's in 2 pieces that day. And if you can just block that day for charters, we would love that. We'd love all of our board members to be there. And obviously our team would all be there together as well. Cindy, I'm going to turn to Vice Chair Phillips for our next item that will take us
It will be
up
very
for
short.
lunch.
Chair, the good news is, at least I think it will be. If it's not, then we'll address that at the time. So going to our bylaws, the vice chair, I learned, and I've known, we know as a group, that the vice chair is responsible for board officer elections. And just to read the salient point here, the election process shall be as directed by the vice chair, and where there is no contest for the positions, the elections can be disposed of by a simple motion carried by a majority vote of members serving. And now notice that's members serving, not members present. So here we would likely need to be unanimous. But I want to mention that in anticipation of today, I, for several months now, have asked for, well, over 2 months, have asked for nominations, emails of interest for those positions. The only interested members to date have been Chair Bowles, who is willing to continue as chair. And as I am transitioning out, I announced that I would not be running again for vice chair, obviously. And so member Cisneros, no, she's right there. Member Spiker has indicated her interest in running for vice chair, and I have had no other board members interested. If there are nominations from the floor, as it were today, then we will need to probably put the election to the very end of the meeting, because we would need to ensure that we had an ability to gather an anonymous vote. Probably with a digital link sent to each person. I didn't anticipate that per se, but that's something Amber and I could madly put together by the end of the meeting, so we could actually do that. So I just want to ask, are there members here present who would like to state their interest in running for either chair or vice chair of the State Charter School Board for this year? Okay, I imagine some of you will be serving in future years, but as of today, I'm looking then for let's do each office individually. I'm first looking for a motion that Chair Bowles continue as chair of the State Charter School Board for the year ahead. Would anyone care to make that motion?
I would be thrilled to make a motion. We continue having our current chair acting in the same capacity for next year, Chair Bowles.
And do I have a second to that motion? Okay. So we have a motion by member Businger and second by member Bassett. Any discussion of that motion? Well, then let's take a vote and let's do a voice vote just because our technology is what it is today, right? I do love the owl for so many reasons. So member Businger,
Yes, whatever.
member Cisneros,
Yeah,
member Bassett
Yes.
and Chair Bowles.
Yes.
And I still am a member until I'm not, and I also say yes. So that is unanimous. We have 5 members out of our 7. So that is a majority vote of members serving. I'm looking for a second motion that member Spiker be instated as the vice chair for the State Charter School Board. Is there anyone who could make that motion? Or would feel comfortable making that motion?
can I say so moved, or do I have to restate?
You
that?
can say so.
So moved.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Okay, we have a motion from member Cisneros and a second from member Bassett. Let's go ahead and take a voice vote from this side. Member Bassett,
Yes.
Chair Bowles,
Yes.
member Cisneros.
Yes,
And member Businger.
Yes,
And I also vote yes. So it is done. We have a chair and a new vice chair, our chair, Brian Bowles, and vice chair Stephanie Spiker. And I will continue this meeting in this position since she is absent, or otherwise I would yield the chair here to her. And then we will see her in her proper position next meeting.
All right, now let me ask a question though about timing. So that means she would immediately take that position.
She would.
As opposed to starting the first of the calendar year.
Well, my understanding is that typically we have in the past, so I guess that the bylaws allow for some give there, and the chair, you might want to decide that, but I will say this, in the past, we've typically, since I've been on the board, we have typically done our elections in sort of August. The problem with that this year, yeah, the problem with that, and then those individuals, because we typically have members transitioning off at the end of spring, beginning of summer. And then as they come in August, we have the new voting on officers. The way that this last year and even the year before, actually, we've been behind 2 years, but again, it's really it's been a condition of the fact that the legislature has been slow both to not, and the governor slow to nominate, and the legislature is slow to confirm. And you'll recall that in the last couple of years, there was a law passed. It included a number of commissions that the governor appoints to, not just the State Charter School Board, but that required, and it had not been, this requirement had not been there before. There was a requirement that the Senate confirm those appointments. Prior to that, the governor appointed, and that was done. And that it really expedited it. I think it's actually a better process to have the Senate confirm, and it's more parallel with other processes we have in our state government. But it was very quick and slick to have the governor confirm, and then we were done. So as a result of that, we've had confirmations coming in May and June, and it's finally by August or September even, right? That we have confirmations in interim committee meetings at the legislative level. So it may be that we want to consider a calendar change that allows for, because we used to always have our new membership, if we had people transitioning off, we always had them there and ready to go by August. It may be, it's unusual for I should have transitioned off last summer, but because of the individual who's being appointed and the timing there, I will not be transitioning off until that individual is appointed and confirmed by the Senate. And I agreed to do that, was asked to by the governor's office. That wasn't just Chair Bowles and I over lunch, right? So it may be a wise thing for this board to consider, because we are allowed to do that. We have yearly elections for officers, but to decide when the timing of that might be better than it has been in past years, actually, since our inception, based on the new requirements and the timing that's now being set up by the governor and the legislature. So I'm gonna leave that in your good hands.
Yeah.
But I think technically speaking, and I offered while I'm on the board for just a tiny bit more to help with that transition. But my own feeling would be that Stephanie, now having been elected today, should sit in the vice
Right.
chair position when she comes next month.
Right, and really my question, and I'm not gonna talk a lot because you, true to your word also that it's done quickly and we're gonna be ready for lunch at noon. But my question is relative to the timing. When do we elect officers and how do we do that? Knowing that, I believe, and I mentioned to Crystal before we started today, that member Bassett and I believe, go off next year, the end of next year. So by July 1, which we typically don't meet in July, but you will want to have new officers elected in June so that they can prepare for your first meetings. And that's among all of you and Stephanie Spiker and Eric Olson, who are not here today, and it would be among them, among all of you. So as you're thinking about that towards, it's only a few more months before it'll be time to elect new officers as you continue into a new board year. So following that fiscal year cycle is what I'm thinking is a good plan.
The only problem about, if I could share, is that you don't have your new board members instated, who often like with the State Board of Ed, they wait until the new members are instated in order to do new officers.
Right.
And otherwise you have an old group that's going out, voting in the officers for those who are coming in. And so that's one of the reasons we drag our feet, is because we actually anticipated not only my replacement, but also Michelle Smith's replacement. We did get member Biesinger who replaced Michelle Smith, but we don't have mine, but normally we would. And so it may be that you want to elect your officers in the September, October, when you have the newly transitioned members in, so that they decide their membership, their leadership.
You're
at
gonna
that
have to
point.
have someone who's conducting the meetings continuing into the year. So maybe
Oh,
that's
that's true.
something we
That's
should
true.
talk about and bring back a plan to the board, and others of you might want to have some
Okay.
thoughts about that, but just thinking of that time. I think I'm right. I'm not trying to push either of us off member Bassett quickly, but I believe our timing is the end of June.
So our website shows 2026.
Oh, so
For
we have
you
to
and
get
I.
beyond that?
Yeah.
Well, I should have told you, don't even look at the website. Let's change that, but. All right, so we should be looking at it and it will probably be in the timing too of us requesting new members, getting them in place.
Takes a while.
Takes a while
Yeah,
to do that.
it
So
does.
just our timing to make that happen. And
Yep.
with that said, we're 2 minutes past into the time for lunch and we should be able to do that. And in a new place, I'm not sure where to direct folks in the room to the east. And so please join us for lunch, everyone, and we will reconvene at 1 o'clock. This meeting is adjourned until that time.
Thank you.
I feel like we could. We're gonna eat here.
Yeah, thank you. Good to see you.
I did nothing.
Oh, you did good. You represent well. Good to have you here today, James. Yeah, very good. Look forward to talking to you more. All right.